In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create professional intros and outros for your podcast. And then I'm going to show you how we can utilize Adobe Audition's template feature so you don't have to spend hours editing and recreating new intros and outros for every podcast episode. I also want to thank Jay Douglas for submitting this video idea in the comment section on another video in this channel. He actually provided me with his music and his intro and the podcast, so I'm going to be utilizing his show elements to recreate the templates. He actually wanted to know how to batch process intros and outros without having to manually do that. However, I believe it's very important to create a new session for every single podcast episode because you'll never know when you'll want to go back and change something or add something. So let's get started and dive straight into Adobe Audition. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is import our audio files and create the multi-track session. So I have the file here. So Jay sent me this audio file. And then I just checked real quick. Okay, it is, the sample type is 44,100 hertz, 32-bit. And what's this right here?
That's it for now. Be blessed and live life to the fullest.
Okay,
that's
so
it.
That sounds like the outro.
Station Pod. Welcome to the Inspiration Station Podcast, brought to you by DisabledVetsRock.com.
I want these voiceovers for the intros and outros to be around -18. So I'm going to hold down Option Command A. It's going to pop up the amplitude statistics, and I see it's at 22.86 LUFS. So I do want it a little louder. So I might go ahead and just normalize it to -1 just to see how loud it is. -16. It's a little loud. So I'm just going to tone it down about 2 dB. Recheck it, -18. That's totally fine with me. So let's look at the outro. We are now at -21. You know what? I'm going to add a little compression to it. And now we're at -18. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And then what I would do here, I would do a save as, and I'm going to hit processed because I always want to keep the original file. The file he sent me was an MP3, so I'm just going to keep it as the same MP3 size, and I'm going to add this to the show elements and save that there. And then I'm going to do the same here as well. Now the music, I like to check the loudness, but it looks pretty good. I don't see anything, -16. Okay, great. I'll work with that. So now we have these audio files ready to be imported into the multi-track session. So let's get that set up. You can hit multi-track, and I'm going to be creating the first episode. Inspiration Station Podcast, episode 1. I just like to make up little naming conventions like that. Template, you know what? There's no template yet because we are going to be creating that. Sample rate, 44,100 hertz is great. Bit depth, 16 is great. Mixed stereo. So let's hit browse. So I created an Inspiration Station Podcast folder. I'm going to go to episodes to edit. I'm going to go to episode 1, and I'm going to create this multi-track session here in the Adobe Audition session folder. So I'm going to hit choose, and then I'm going to hit OK. So now we have a blank multi-track session here. And so when I'm creating my intros and outros, what I'm going to do is import the music right there. Great. And I'm going to import the intro, and then I'm going to import the outro, right? Okay, so when we are creating our intro, I try to use the natural intros, fade-ins and fade-outs, the melody of the song. So this is just the natural beginning.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station Pod.
Okay, great. So I'm totally happy with that. And we want to put the voice in between major hits so it's not conflicting.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station.
So here's a downbeat here. A bass drum there.
Welcome to the
bass drum there. And I put the start of the voice in between the bass drum hits. And so what I like to do is decrease the amplitude. So we're going to take down the volume a bit when the voice comes in, and the music's going to duck down a little bit.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station Pod.
And overall, the music might be a little loud, so I might take that down to -3 dB. And then I'm going to take this down to about -6 dB. And then let's take a quick listen.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station podcast.
So the voice is a little more forward, and I'm going to drop it to about -13, 14. Let's hear it.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station podcast.
I want some more music in there. It's a little too quiet now.
Station podcast. Brought to you by disabledvetsrock.com.
And then afterwards, you can maybe increase the volume a little bit.
Vetsrock.com.
Okay, so I like to have full phrases of the melody, and I stopped it at the 1 right there. I kind of like what we have going on right now, but it's going to depend on the start of the podcast. So he sent me a podcast file. Let me see here. What are we using? So let's look at the file. It is a 43-second file. Okay, so it's a 43-second podcast. Let's see how loud it is. -10 LUFS, so that is super loud. I want it to be around -18, -16 when we're building the show. I'm going to make it into a mono file, normalize to -1. Let's see how loud it is now at -14. Okay, I'm going to take this down 4 dB. -4. Great, let's listen to it.
Listen, you can't just do the things that you want to do when you're motivated or when things are going in your favor. You have to do these things.
All right, and I'm going to do a little processing here. If you want to learn how to do the processing, I made a video on how I process it. And you can watch that by clicking this title above, or it's going to be in the show notes too. Click it, save it. And so what I'm doing right now, I'm just doing a little bit of noise reduction. And then I'm going to do a little bit of noise gate, apply.
Even when it's cold, even when it's snowing, even when it's raining, even if you had a nightmare.
Okay, that's enough work. I'm going to put into that. It's already MP3 file, so I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to write process. And then I go from my raw file to my process file, so I know where all the audio files live. Great, so let's go back to the session. I'm going to drag and drop the podcast into it. So let's take a quick listen at the end of the intro.
Brought to you by disabledvetsrock.com.
Listen, you can't just do the things that you want to do when you're motivated or when...
Okay, great. I like to have the music fade out when the podcast is starting, so it's not just like abrupt end to the song and then to the podcast. I like for it to flow naturally into the conversation.
Vetsrock.com.
Listen, you can't just do the things that you want to do when you're motivated.
So I use a combination of the volume here and a fade out for more control.
Listen, you can't just do the things that you want to do when you're motivated or when things are going in your favor.
Now let's work on the outro.
Focus on.
And again, I like to use the natural endings to the songs for the outros. But if you like a different section of the song, you can always just fade it out naturally. But it just feels more complete when it's the end of the song. So when you are looking for music for your podcast, make sure you really like the beginning of the song and the end of the song. Or if there's a section in the middle of the song which has a natural intro or outro, then that can work as well. Okay, I like to leave full measure at least. 1, 2, 3, 4. Since it is a short podcast, I'm assuming a little bit of shorter outro. We don't want a lot of music. So let me at least back up. I was going to say 10 seconds, but that 9 seconds seems pretty good. The end of the podcast, a good rule of thumb, at least 2 seconds going into the outro of the voiceover. If you just have something consistent, it can be 3, 4 seconds, whatever you want. And then starting here, let's see how long this is going out of it. 7 seconds, sure. And so what I would do is I might just do a natural fade in through the whole thing.
What happens, I will still do the things I'm going to do to create the outcome that I'm focused on and that I can...
Okay, well, it's a little loud. So I'm going to turn it down.
Create the outcome that I'm focused on and that I consistently work towards. Do you understand that?
That's it for now. Be blessed.
All right, so the music overall is just too loud.
focused on and that I consistently work towards. Do you understand that?
That's it for now. Be blessed and live life to the fullest.
I mean, I might tweak this a little more and do stuff, but for the YouTube video, I'm just showing you how to do it. And then you can use your creative juices to flow, and you can adjust anything you want, pick the different parts of the song, adjust the volume, loudness, whatever you want to do. I'm just showing you what I do. So now we have all of these tracks here, and I want to create a brand new file of the podcast so I can upload it to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So what I like to do is select all the clips. We're going to go to multi-track, bounce to new track, and then selected clips only, which is Option Command B. That's a very important hotkey to remember. So I'm going to select it, Option Command B. It creates a brand new stereo file. And the first thing I always do is normalize it to -1, because that's what we're going to do. -15, it's a little loud. So what I'm going to do is just do -1 dB. So I decreased the whole loudness by -1. So if I check loudness again, we're at -16, and that's the loudness I want for a podcast volume. So let's hit play and listen.
Welcome to the Inspiration Station podcast, brought to you by DisabledVetsRock.com.
Listen, you can't just do the things that you want to do when you're motivated or when things are going in your favor. You
And then you go through the podcast.
create the outcome that I'm focused on and that I consistently work towards. Do you understand that?
That's it for now. Be blessed and live life to the fullest.
Okay, great. So then you want to go ahead and save this WAV file as an MP3, and I will go ahead and put it in the completed MP3s folder, and then you just label it Inspiration Station Podcast 001 Final V1, and then I can send that off to the client or to upload it to wherever it needs to go. But I'm thinking this whole intro part might be a little long. That's something else you can do. You can just keep adjusting and choosing and doing whatever you want. That's what it is. So let's say I want to make it shorter. I don't like it that long. Delete all that. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that.
Well,
and then what you could do with that, I'm going to bring all the files back to the front, and just say you want to bounce it down again, bouncing it down, normalizing, checking the volume, -15. I want to do -1, right? And then we're doing a new MP3 file, and then you can go to your complete MP3 and be like, you know what? I like V2 a little better. But when we are first creating the podcast episode, it's totally okay to have multiple versions of the very first podcast. Okay, great. So let me show you how we make the template. So what I do first is I'm going to go ahead and clear this session, and Option Command Delete does that. So on this episode 1, I see that the voice comes in right here.
Listen.
I'm going to go ahead and put my cursor here. I'm going to hit the letter M for marker, and then you can rename it. It can be Start of Podcast. Great. And then this is already set up there. None of that's going to change. But what will change is the length of this podcast episode overall. And I can see that the end of the voice happens there. Ooh, look at this little marker. So it looks like if you click in the clip, you can make markers by hitting M, and it makes a marker in the audio file. And if I double click the audio file, you'll see the markers are still there. I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to go back to multi-track view. And then here, I'm going to put the marker right there at the end of the file. So now what you want to do, what you could do is select these and put them together as a group clips. And now they're grouped together. So you can move them anywhere you want, and they're always going to be moving. And Now you'll have podcast episodes which are shorter or longer. Let's just say the podcast episode ends over here. And now all you have to do is bring over your handy dandy outro, line up the marker with the end of it. And that's exactly the 2 seconds. And you have your outro. Woo! How cool is that? And then same thing with the beginning of the intro, beginning of the podcast. Let's just say it starts there. Great. And the end of the podcast is over here. Great. Super simple. Now you just put in the podcast episode itself right here. And so he has given me 7 files. I'll just put in each file here, select all the clips and bounce them down and create the brand new podcast episode. But we're creating the template. So each episode looks like it's probably going to be around a minute. So I'm going to put it here. Let me put at the 2-minute marker just to give it some space. Great. So the start of the podcast is here. We know this marker is going to be rename. I think you have to double click into it. You can rename it here. And this is going to be end of podcast. Also, if you don't have that little marker feature in it, you can always have this fade happen at the very end of it, or you could click in the volume and put a little marker there so you know that's where you should place the file at the end of the podcast. Perfect. Now what you want to do is you can go ahead and label these tracks anything you want. Perhaps I want to move this down. I want to make this the main podcast episode. I want to make this the intro, outro, voiceover, and I want to make this the music. And perhaps I want this to be ads. I don't know. You can make it whatever you want. But what you do now is go to File, Export, Session as Template. You can name it whatever you want. And then I'm going to hit OK. Now, close everything. Sure, I'll save that. So let's just say I want to work on episode 2. So it's going to be the Inspiration Station Podcast 002. Now I'm going to go to Template. And under Template, I am going to go to Inspiration Station Podcast. And now the template is set. I'm going to go to Browse. I'm going to go to episode 2. And I'm going to put the Adobe session there. I'm going to hit OK. And so all I have to do now is drag and drop episode 2. So let me show you what I will do when I drag and drop in episode 2. And so this episode 2 is 24 seconds long. Let's take a listen.
I don't ever feel I have no help. I've had brain.
Okay, I'll keep it stereo right now. Let's see how long this or how loud it is. -19. Let's give it a boost. I'm going to do hard limiter. I'm going to boost it up -111. I'm going to give it a good old boosty boost. And then let me do one more. Great, that looks good for me. And of course, you want to go ahead and resave this file as the process file. And then we can just simply put the intro of the podcast right here.
I don't ever feel I have no help. I've had rainbows in my clouds. And
then I will go ahead and find the end of the podcast.
I think.
And then you just line up the end of her voice with that. And then you can select it all and bounce it down. But of course, this is the first time I'm hearing this file in real time. It has music on the back end of it, and this music doesn't really work well with this, so I would have to play around with it to figure out how to make it sound appropriate. And then you hit save. I'm going to bounce everything down. I'm going to normalize it to -1. I'm going to see -1846. I want to give it a 2 dB boost, which I just did, and then I'm going to save it as an MP3. I know I'm moving quickly, but that's just the way it is. Just so you can see just kind of what happens. And now you have a MP3 file ready to upload to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this simple tutorial on how to create Adobe Audition templates is going to help you save time and really enhance your production workflow. And if you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I will address those to the best of my ability. And if you are a business looking to start your own podcast, to generate leads, to nurture leads, to grow your brand, to network or connect, you can learn more about my full service podcast production by going to everywordmedia.com. You can book a call with me and I can dive deeper into your business goals and needs, and let's see if it will be a good fit. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great day. Take care.